gunshot wound to the head.
Victim found to be longtime Mendocino County rancher Dick Drury.
Dick Drury.
Growing up here, I always felt free. There are two worlds in Mendocino County. The one I grew up in is ranching. The other is infamous.
If I seen his rig there and be like, oh man, it's kind of weird that Dick's just parked here, not like him. So when they got a little closer, he noticed the windows down and his head was tilted forward with like blood dripping still. They never found a weapon of any kind. No rifle, no pistol. Those guys, they generally went somewhere with a rifle at least. There's no rig tracks on the road or anything like that. Reached in to shut the rig off, man, gas light's on. Half hour from any gas station around. Sure seems pretty odd that, you know, you never run across one of these old timers living in the hills their whole life that went anywhere that didn't have a full tank of gas when they came home from town. They had to backtrack to get cell phone service and called the sheriffs out there, had to wait for them to come in.
Dan, what do you think happened?
Living in that country, it's hard to say who's got a beef with you. Yeah. You might have made the wrong neighbor mad or the wrong whoever.
When I first heard about Dick Drury's murder, I was shocked. He was a beloved, upstanding member of the Mendocino Humboldt community. I moved away years ago, but when I heard about Dick Drury's murder, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started worrying about my dad. He still works out here. It's been 3 years without any suspects or arrests, just terrifying rumors. So my sister and I decided to go home and look into it for ourselves. I'm going to speak with another local legend from that generation, his best friend, Jim Eddy. Here we go. So this is you?
Yeah, this is Dick, and this is his wife, Phyllis, and myself. We were really close friends. We only 7 days difference in our age. We were going to have a birthday party, but about that time I heard that he'd been shot. It just blew me, you know. So I can't believe that you know, somebody would take his life.
Did he get along with his neighbors out there?
Well, the marijuana thing really changed it. The whole valley is turned over because people don't know each other anymore.
So how's this impacted your dad?
It's been difficult going 3 years now without knowing who or why, who killed Dick and why it happened. What's the reason behind shooting him as he's sitting in his pickup? Things have really changed since you guys grew up here. Be nice to everybody. I see trespass grows where we run cows in the National Forest. My daughter and I have gone down a creek bed looking for cattle and had a young man with a gun follow us the whole way and tell us that, you know, we can't be there. There's about 6,000 illegal grows on American public land. A lot of it for me is just the damage that's left behind.
Do you feel safe out here?
It's a fact of life that we have to face. I can't say I don't think about what happened to Dick when I'm out here sometimes.
So Dick was found in, I believe, January of 2021 in his vehicle on Bell Springs Road, and he'd been shot to death. Myself and Humboldt County Sheriff's Office both got this call. He was actually murdered inside the Humboldt County line. You have to remember Dick's property went in Mendocino and Humboldt County, but Dick Drury's investigation, his homicide, that case is absolutely the manifestation of what everyone is concerned about who works out in the hills or works out in these rural areas. All right. There's some pieces of property over on that corner of the valley, out by the airport and then out by the dump, and those are pretty sketchy, but we're gonna go out there. When we go out there, if they recognize that it's me, we likely will not have a problem. If it looks like there's gonna be any issues, I'll just give you guys a head nod, and that means it's time for us to go. There's a bulletproof vest in the back of the truck. If it gets real hairy, take my truck and drive on. All right. People are armed because they're concerned more about dope rips and things like that. And Underpass Road, walked into a grow where a guy got a round off at me with a 12 gauge. And I saw him and I was screaming at him in English and Spanish for him to drop it, drop it, drop it. He still got a round off. Coming around this turn right up here, there was a young man about 20 years old who'd been shot to death and was laid out alongside the road. They just left him there. He had a holster for his trimming shears on him. He had money from Mexico on him. He'd been shot numerous times. We've never solved that case. We are seeing some things happening right now in the United States, particularly in these out-of-the-way areas, that we would have seen in Mexico 10, 15 years ago. And now, all of a sudden, we've got all of these bad folks in competition for water. They're in competition for land. You'll have to speak with Sheriff Hansel about Dick Drury's investigation.
Since Dick's body was found across the Humboldt County line, we're headed to Eureka to speak with Sheriff Hansel about the status of the investigation.
I mean, it definitely looks like a hit to me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it has all of the Hollywood makings of a hit.
Right.
None of this was covered in snow at the time that Dick was killed. It snowed later in the afternoon, and it snowed a lot.
Why would anyone want to kill Dick? Did he see something? Then we start looking at every aspect of the case, starting with his family. Everyone's a suspect until they're not. And so we looked at the family, looked at the situation, looked at the neighbors, looked at everything, all possibilities. This shroud of secrecy has kind of permeated throughout the whole culture. We don't know all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. There could be literally hundreds of murders that have occurred out in our county. That keeps me up at night for sure.
Why does everybody assume this has something to do with cannabis?
So we gotta talk about the start and the origin of marijuana here in Northern California. That's where it all began. So in the 60s, they had this back to the land movement. That was a huge culture shift here in Humboldt County, Mendocino, and Trinity County. Marijuana has brought in a different element here in Northern California, and it's changed the scope of what's happening here. Once people started recognizing that there's money to be made in marijuana, and it all has to do with scale, and marijuana became big business. It just blew up here. Then we started seeing the organized crime moved in, and people started taking over here in the Emerald Triangle. We've seen Bulgarians, Russians, the Chinese moving in and trying to take over the illegal industry here. And it's not just marijuana. We've seen our homicide rate go sky high, as well as human trafficking, labor trafficking, sex trafficking. And you look at this and go, this gotta be a third world country. No, this is California. This is Northern California. This is what's going on.
What would you say to anyone with information about this case?
If anyone knows anything, they need to contact law enforcement and tell us about it. And this is the time where they need to trust law enforcement and pass that information on so we can solve this case. Because Dick did not deserve to die this way.
We're about to head up Bell Springs Road across the mountain from where Dick was killed, talk to some locals and see if they'll tell us anything.
What was the Dick thing? Is it some cartel, or are they not? Was that potential?
That's what like everyone thinks.
Assumes is the.
That's what they assume.
I had heard about it that day because I have a camera on the road, and people were like, "Hey, what's up with your camera? Like, can we see what vehicles went by and all that?" You know, and so I had heard about it that day.
And did you have anything on your camera?
Yeah, it wasn't anything I could really see, so.
I think it snowed that day too, so I don't know.
Yeah,
how
that's what it
visibility
was. It had snowed that morning, and so the camera was actually off. The internet had shut off for it.
Yeah, I mean, that whole thing was so weird. I mean, it's creepy. The Drury Ranch got broken up in the 70s. Folks bought the land in 75. A whole bunch of a full wave, the first wave of the Back to the Land movement. And then in 85, they got busted. You know, the National Guard, helicopter, all for 30 plants. People have a right to grow plants. People have a right to grow herb. With legalization, you know, you still see a lot of mom and pop, like small scale production, but you also see some really large scale, kind of unregulated criminal element production. Regulations are designed with bad actors in mind, but bad actors don't care about regulations. Yes, I mean, it's really tough to comment on. And I mean, I think there's, you know, I'm not gonna lie that there is an element of fear there where it's like nobody knows what the fuck happened there, and so I'm not really like, oh, us super obvious with our farm stand right on the road, like let's stir up some shit with somebody who's still at large. So I'm certainly not here to say that there hasn't been some bad shit that has happened, because there has. And I guess for us, like, we just really try to stay isolated from it.
Just as we're about to head up to the crime scene, one by one, all of my sources start canceling on me. Well, like I said, we can keep you anonymous, we can hide your identity.
No, I'd rather not.
Okay.
I don't want to do anything that will upset or anything.
Hi, this is Keely. I just spoke with. It didn't seem like she wanted to talk without you. I'm hoping we can make something work. Please call me back. Let me know if it's worth coming out tonight around 6. I think you said you'd be back. Or if you just, you know, if the deal is that you kind of would rather not be involved, let me know that. When you talk to people, they say they're not scared, and they say they're not worried about being out in the public land, whatever. They're not worried about it. It's gotten a lot better, whatever. But they won't go on the record. And maybe they've said everything they know and there's just nothing more to be said. But the silence that we're getting is pretty loud.
With all my sources suddenly dark on me, I'm left with one last lead. Someone told me that a man was overheard bragging about the murder at the only store on the mountain. We have no idea what this guy looks like, so we're a little spooked. But we're going in blind for one last chance at finding someone who can tell me something, in a place where everyone already looks at strangers sideways.
Tara, can you just tell me about the store and you're growing up out here on Bell Springs?
Well, we opened in 1999, and I was born here in 1996.
So do you know everyone on this side of the mountain?
I think pretty much. If they stop in the store, I know them. There are some hermits that don't stop in the store, but yeah, I think we know most people around here.
Which is not always the case, because for years there were so many people up here. It was a greed spree. It was much nicer back then when it was more of an outlaw culture than a corporate criminal culture, which is what has evolved and what we have in place right now. You know, that's they're the ones who are punitive and extortive, and basically in order to live out here, you know, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever, you had to have integrity. People had to trust you in order to get by, and that was totally blown out of the water by, well, legalization. I was never a fan for legalization. I felt the black market was much more equitable. I've always differentiated the living outside the law means you have to be responsible and respectful. The 70s were amazing. That was the best time.
The Dick Drury thing, are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
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 Was that organized crime after legalization?
That was after. I think that was more of a alleged personal vendetta.
I had heard someone was bragging about committing the murder.
Yes. Yeah.
Would you be willing to tell us who?
Yeah, I don't know.
First-hand knowledge, you heard him bragging, or?
Close knowledge, the son-in-law of the guy. Yeah.
Okay, he told you that? Wow.
Yeah, we know who killed him. I mean, yeah, and the cops know who killed him. It was over water.
Did this guy tell you he did, or you heard it through his son-in-law or whatever?
No, I know the folks involved. I feel pretty confident, as do many other individuals around here know that, the person doesn't really show his face and, hasn't been in the store since accusations were out there and people knew pretty much with certainty. And if you heard their story of the witnesses, which I did firsthand, it's totally credible.
What did they say?
Well, I'm not going to go quoting it.
Do you want the police to do something about it?
Well, I don't know. I don't really, at this point,
So we've tracked down all of the close neighbors up on Bell Springs Road, particularly one. We found a woman on Facebook with the same last name. I think it's his daughter. And she posts publicly a lot. I've been reading through her posts going back 3 years. It's getting pretty weird.
We've heard a rumor that Dick canceled a water agreement with this neighbor when he found out that he was using the water to grow a large amount of cannabis. There are some people up there close to the case that seem like they know exactly what happened, but then you have family members, other neighbors that don't.
The fact that someone was willing to kill a neighbor over water. You have a lot of desperate people coming out here. There's a lot of money on the line, so I think it's only gonna get worse. Growing up here, I always felt free. Lost in the Headlines is the place I knew. The people I still admire most. Good, honest people, working to build a community. It's difficult to see what my home has become, how much things have changed. I can't imagine how Dick Drury felt, what his loved ones feel now. It's ironic because that's what the Back to the Land movement came searching for, in these cowboy towns, 3 hours out of San Francisco. The freedom to create something new, utopia in the mountains, paradise found. Half a century later, I ask myself, how are things in paradise?